Right. Okay. So welcome, Dominique. It's so lovely to have you here, and we're really excited to have you as one of our speakers for the GrassTree Fellowship. I thought you might like to start by introducing yourself to everyone listening.
Sure. My name's Dominique Hes. I live in Melbourne, right in a little part of Melbourne called South Kingsville, which is the lands of the 𝐬𝐤𝐞. At the moment here, we're moving from Manameet into Bareen, so from autumn into winter. And it was quite chilly this morning, quite beautiful, still clear blue skies and sunshine, just very cold, icy cold. My background is I did an undergraduate in science, and then I did a master's of engineering, and then I did a PhD in architecture, and then I got into governance through being a founding member for the Living Futures Institute in Australia, and then moving into Green Fleet and a few other board roles. And I was through that I've done some governance training, so I've done a certificate in governance. And I like teaching, so I've done a certificate in teaching as well. So I kind of I really should get a legal something as well, because that's probably the only language I don't speak well. But yes, I've been always with the question of how are we better citizens of this world of our future? How are we better participants? Well, I thought
Yeah.
science might have the answer, and then I thought engineering might have the answer, and then I thought design might have the answer. And I think it's somewhere in between everything. Sorry, I'm about to sneeze. No, I'm not.
Thank you. No, I love that that search that you're describing and the interdisciplinary approach that you have. But I've also noticed lately, because you're a very proficient writer on Substack, which I love to follow, and lately you've been talking a lot about story as well. So perhaps before we get into the governance, I'd love to hear your take on what you think regeneration is and how what place story has in that.
Yeah, so I started introducing the concept of regenerative development into Melbourne from 2005. So I've been trying to practice this concept for quite a while, and I tend to do a little bit of academic stuff, but I also try and do it in real life, in real projects. And back in 2015, I heard David Courton talk about change the story, change the future. And that was a critique of our modern stories. And then here in Australia, the Indigenous people have a very strong oral culture. And the way that you listen to an oral story and learn from that is very different to learning from a book, because you learn from a book, you go looking for something that agrees with you. You know, particularly as an academic, you go searching for the things that back up your argument, as opposed to reading the whole thing. You know, how many of us have only read the executive summary and then maybe just do the low-hanging fruit of the recommendations? That's all reducing the holistic capacity to listen to whatever that report is. And so for me, that's where the stuff and story comes in. What that's leading to is that we're focusing more and more on stuff. So the regulations, the metrics, the assessments, the ways of making sure every school is teaching at the same level. And so then you start putting in so much effort around the admin and
Mm.
verification and monitoring and so forth that you kind of forget the reason why, the forest and the trees, the whole thing.
Yeah.
And so when it distracts us from looking at the story and saying, is this actually the right story?
Mm.
One of the famous sayings is, it's harder to think about the end of capitalism than it is to think about the end of humanity.
Mm. Yeah.
And it's like, that's wrong story. We surely, fabulousness of humanity, our creativity, our capacity, our ingenuity
Mm.
is so much more than capitalism.
Yeah.
so, so that's why I've been exploring how focusing on the stuff is not allowing us to create the right story.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. I love the way you can balance the science, the engineering, the architecture, and the story. It's a rare combination. So we love that. I wonder if that's why, because I want to talk to you today about the fact that Regen Melbourne, a pioneering organisation in Victoria, approached you about being the voice of nature for their organisation. Can you tell me about the moment that question invitation landed with you, what it meant, and why you said yes?
Sure. It was October 2024 with a Zoom call with Kai, the CEO, and Melianne, the chair. And they said, oh, we're very interested in talking to you about our board. And I was like, okay, I don't know if I've got scope for another board, it's like, all right. And then they went, well, we'd really like you to consider being the voice of nature on the board. And I was like, oh, I like where this is going. And they said, yeah, it'll be kind of a year's experiment to come and join the board and be the voice of nature and help us to figure out what that could look like for us. And I was like, yes and no. The no bit is no, not for 1 year. And the yes is yes, if we can do it for 3 years. If it is a participatory action research project where we actually document what we're doing and what we're learning and have, that after each board meeting, have some reflections from the board members and the staff on the outcomes so that we can create some sort of ongoing resource and that it's all open source so that we can share that. And so, yes, so I said yes, as long as it can be 3 years. And it's a process led by experience, not by starting off with the rules. So starting with developing the story together as opposed to the rules of how to do it. And also, I like the fact that they talked about the voice of nature. I didn't realize quite at the time how much that resonated with me, the whole story thing. But if you look at the other models, it's more of a guardianship. And a guardianship, just like a guardianship for a child, is more power over. Whereas the idea of a voice, it's more of a conversation. And so when I first started at Regen Melbourne, I said, I am as biased and as fallible as any other human person. I will bring my fiduciary duties director hat on and I will speak uh, as the voice of nature, but I'm still interpreting nature through my experiences of my life. And so this is a conversation, and you are allowed to argue with me, and you are allowed to be nature yourself. You are allowed to bring your perspective. Yeah, nature speaking through you. So it was more that I hold the space, and we'll talk about my process in a minute, but yeah, that I read the papers with both hats on. So I specifically read the papers from my fiduciary hat. Do I agree with this? Is everything there? Have we covered all our risks? Are our finances okay, etc.? And then I will read it, go for a walk or whatever, and then I will actively read it with the voice of nature.
Okay,
It's my process. It's not perfect.
No, that's really
That's how I do it.
interesting to hear that. I've never heard anyone describe it like that. That's quite beautiful. And you're touching on something really important, right? Because it's the story we can buy into. And I think people buy into the idea of the voice of nature. But what does that really mean once you're in it? And so tell us, you touched there, tell us a bit more about that process because the idea we
Yeah.
but what
I'm not sure how much this will come through on the I'm not sure how much this will come through on the video, but this is a typical journal. So I split it in half. I read the papers and I number the papers with my fiduciary hat on, and then I read the papers in the same space at a different time with the voice of nature. And sometimes it's blank, and sometimes there are some overlapping things, and sometimes it jumps from one side, it says story, from one side to the other, and it connects the two. That's kind of my process. And then I create a slide deck where I kind of try and summarize because my handwriting is the neatest. And usually I bring in some images of walks I've taken or something around that time of the year so that we're connecting to the reality of place. And then I'll send that slide deck with my reflections on the board meeting to everyone that was at the meeting for their reflections with a couple of reflection questions. So that's kind of the process. The first year, the 8 meetings that we had were hit and miss as far as how much nature came through. And what was really interesting is that nature came through much more strongly when we were face to face in nature than when we were online and just getting through the agenda and probably distracted by our phones and other things.
Mm.
So yeah, so that was quite an interesting pattern that we noticed last year. And if you look at LinkedIn, I've done a reflection of some reflection questions I did at the end of the year with the board. And one of the other things that we noticed was we used to have a section in the agenda for nature, and we never got to it. We always felt guilty, or it was too quick, or it was rushed. And so
Ah.
there was this really strong feedback, like nature should just be part of it shouldn't just be relegated to, the last half hour of a meeting or even the front of the meeting. It should really be there present. And that's where everyone felt that it had the most power, was when it was just brought in. And so as an example of that, we were talking about funding, and we have sort of mostly philanthropically funded, and there are rhythms to that funding where some parts of the year there isn't a lot of funding, and other parts of the year there's lots of funding. And so I brought the idea of seasons, and in summer and spring you're more active and you're doing more, and in autumn and winter you're slowing down, and in autumn and winter happens to be when we have our least funding. And so we started talking about, instead of
Mm.
trying to plan the year by months, trying to do the same thing with the same budget, we actually plan the year so
Mm.
that most of the budget on the action stuff is spent where there is lots of money, and more of the admin,
Yeah.
less output orientated, event orientated stuff becomes where there's the least amount of funding. And so, yeah, so that's an example of
Yeah.
how it works really well.
I just love the way, you were all clearly willing to experiment and sort of go, hang on, oh yeah, this works or this doesn't work. Because that's how we start things, right? We're like, we have a good idea,
Mm.
and then we, scientifically, we might say we have to prove the concept, but it's really the same having the voice. I love the way you all noticed the difference of having it as an agenda item versus bringing it in naturally. And then when you talked about being face to face, how is it? You
Mm.
answered so many of my questions in that one rich answer, so thank you. Um, I'm just wondering, what is the effect on the people in Regen Melbourne um,
Mm.
as a result of this? Like, how are we seeing this play out in perhaps unexpected ways?
Yeah, so I have some beautiful quotes which I don't have in front of me, and so people will just have to come to the course and listen to it there, from staff on how it's affected them. Pragmatically, if they have important discussions, for example, about the Birrong, the Swimble Birrong, or the Swimble Yarra River, having those while walking
Yeah.
along the river
Mm.
is a huge opener to
Yeah. Mm.
the capacity to get on the same page. I think maybe that's it. It's not that decisions are made easier and because people are on the same page, because they're connected to the context of what they're making a decision for. So I
Mm.
think there's something in that. There is also something in, when you're stressed, the worst thing you can do is be in an office in four walls. You're much better off being outside.
Yes.
There is a grounding in that. And so there is a changing in practice around that the staff have talked about. The CEO, Kai, talks about that it's, I again don't have it in front of me, but it has meant that there is an increased sense of playfulness and innovation and capacity to not feel awkward about asking the
Nice.
wrong question and so forth. There is a sense of more
Interesting.
softness, even though last
Yeah.
year, we had a period of tough financial discussions to be had. Uh, there was a foundational softness around those discussions that were
Yeah.
less than I've experienced in other not-for-profits where they're going through the same stresses.
Mm.
And I look, it could just be that Regen Melbourne attracts really fabulous people for whom this is. They're saying this themselves, so they're awesome people. Plus, they're saying that their own practice has changed. So,
Yeah.
um, at the end of the day, it is subjective, and any organisation going through stress,
Yes.
how do you compare? Uh,
Yeah.
so,
Beautiful. Oh, I love that you have identified that importance of where you do it and how you do it rather than what we're doing, because it's very easy. And I know that's been an important thing for us in the GrassTree Fellowship. And people, when they join, will discover that we're going to get them to go on their own journey in their own time, in their own place. But we're coming together, as you know, in the Northern Rivers to have that strong sense of place with cultural connection with custodians, but also for our own personal sense of place, because this very idea of what is nature is going to be our first question, right? How do you speak for nature? So I love that you identified those experiences, or that Regen Melbourne identified that, how important it was to actually be outside. I guess with the final thing
we'll unpack this.
yeah, we're going to unpack a lot of that.
Yeah. Well, I only have 20 minutes in our sessions, but the one thing that I wanted to just hint at for people is that if you're feeling like a lot of this is a little abstract,
yeah.
There was a discussion around the risk matrix where I had a very interesting experience with that, my model of reading it with one hat and then reading it with another, which has led to a whole different way of approaching the risk matrix. So they'll have to come to the course to find out about that.
Good. Well, I'm no doubt also that 20 minutes is always a guideline. And one of the things we all learned in this work is that, like, being flexible is very important. So I'm sure we'll have some extra time if we need it. It's the quality of what you have to share that's more important for us. Yeah, so I'd just like to finish with this, again, an abstract question, but what do you think it would mean for, I guess, a nation, for any organization, if it starts to become normal that nature has a voice in all our decision making?
At a high level, I think organizations will become less fragile because what it particularly means is that you start bringing the externalities to the table. For a long time, we've said, are there externalities? We don't need to worry about those. They tend to be the clean air, the clean water, the soil fertility, those sorts of things. If those things are sitting at the table and are part of the conversation, the decisions may take longer to make. I'm not hiding from that. It does take that sense of you're bringing more data into the discussion. But when you're bringing more data into the discussion, then the story that comes out of that's much stronger. The purpose, the way that you're working, the decisions that you're making. And so for me, that at highest level, and that's one of the things that I have 8 critical friends that are from different parts of industry, so that I can test whether the outcomes of this make sense. And one of them said, well, don't we just deal with that in the sustainability committee, and doesn't that just go into the risk matrix? And I said to her, yes, well, you could have that compliance reporting. That's a very valid way of doing that. But it's just like if accounting just happened in accounting and was part of the risk matrix, you wouldn't be bringing that into your discussion of how to run the company. And so bringing nature into that level of discussion, into that governance and strategy space, just means that you have that richer conversation. How you support that with the skills and knowledge, that will be the key thing, I think, for the future, will be how do we train. I know in Europe they have the 𝐬𝐿 network. I don't know if you've connected in with those, but they are like a community of practice where they train people to be the voice of the living. And I think there'll be something like that. I think we'll just become more resilient and less fragile organisations.
Beautiful. Okay, well, that's a lovely place to end. Thank you for your time. I really look forward to this evolving, and thank you for being part of the GrassTree Fellowship. And I guess that's our big goal, is like first looking at who we are, who nature is, and then together what are we becoming, and may that impact a more beautiful world, more resilient, and well, for some people it's just about surviving as well. So thank you for your time, Dominique, and we'll see you in the GrassTree Fellowship.